At some time during the 1st century CE, rebellion is forming all around you, raising your anxieties as you fear for the worst. The leader of the zealots, your own nephew, can no longer stop them, and you realize that the temple is going to be destroyed by the Romans in retaliation. You must get out of Jerusalem. Lying down, careful not to shift your weight, your students carry you from the city in your own coffin. You make your way to the town of Yavne, the site north of Jerusalem where you hope to reinvent Judaism such that it doesn't die with you. You begin the work of building a house of study and planting for the future generations. As you kneel down to plant the fruit tree sapling, one of your students comes rushing to find you. "The Messiah has come! The Messiah has come!" he screams. "Come with me to greet the Messiah!" You pause for a moment, recognizing that this might be the moment that you've been waiting for, the moment you've been praying for, the Messiah. You pause for a moment, only a moment, before waving your student on to go greet this potential Messiah without you, for you have work to do. It's a remarkable teaching from somebody who has known such tsuris in his life. Is not the coming of the Messiah and the betterment of days the fulfillment of Yochanan ben Zakkai's most ardent prayers during the darkest of times? Yet he says instead to wave that messenger on, to keep doing the life-sustaining work of planting for future generations before verifying the veracity of his students' claim. It's a radical declaration. It's a declaration that there is considerable harm in being reactionary. It's a declaration that the future is filled with possibility, even when it is disguised by the challenges of the present, and that there is a long game to be played. And perhaps, most importantly, it's a declaration that our actions continue to matter, even in the most hopeless of times. We can't be solely focused on the moment we are in, Yochanan ben Zakkai teaches. We must retain perspective to focus on where we want to be. As Americans and as Jews, his words offer us a much-needed blueprint for the start of the year 5785. For the moment we are in now certainly leaves something to be desired. We're holding a lot right now. As Americans, we are living in perhaps one of the most important counties in the most important state, or commonwealth, forgive me, in a most important election. I don't know about you, but instead of feeling immense pride in my outsized ability to select the path forward that I want for my children's future, I'm counting down the days until I'll feel comfortable turning on the television with them in the room. Every commercial break during the unbeaten Panthers' bid to start this season 6-0 is filled with 30 or 60 seconds of fear-mongering and darkness. Every knock at the door, every ding of my text messages has me counting the days until the conclusion of this election. Don't misunderstand me. To vote is a civic duty and a moral obligation that rises to the status of a religious responsibility in Jewish tradition. I want you to make sure that you're registered to vote. I want you to check the location of your polling place. I want you to double and triple check the instructions on your mail-in ballot, or I want you to get out there on November 5th to vote your conscience no matter whom you'll be voting for. And I'm also counting down the days until it's at least temporarily over. It's a difficult, divisive time to be an American, and we're all holding a lot right now. It's perhaps even more true for us as American Jews, forced to confront the reality of and the insecurity inherent in our minority status more than at any point during my lifetime. Some of you may scoff at that relatively short sample size It was a great moment in my interview with Temple when a questioner remarked that they had socks older than I was. But my lifetime is actually here a useful measurement of time. As I became a bar mitzvah, historian of anti-Semitism Leonard Dinerstein wrote that, quote, by comparing the strength of anti-Semitism in the United States today with what it had been in previous decades or centuries, the obvious conclusion is that it had declined in potency and will continue to do so for the future, end quote. As I prepared my college application essays, it was clear that I could count on my religious and cultural identity to open rather than close doors for my future, unlike the generations before me, or, it turns out, the generations after me. As I entered rabbinical school, anti-Semitism was a fringe movement limited to the remnants of the Klan, and cable pundits had not yet heard of George Soros. Yet today, we face a different reality. In his long-form article for The Atlantic, Franklin Foer argues that the golden age of American Jews is ending. And emotively, I'm hard-pressed to disagree. I need not belabor this point, for to sein a Yid, the Yiddish expression says, it's been a hard year to be a Jew, as my every conversation with you during this past year has borne out, which means that we as Americans and as Jews need Yochanan ben Zakkai's wisdom now more than ever. If you're holding a sapling in your hand and someone tells you, come quickly, the Messiah is here, first finish planting that sapling before going to meet the Messiah. We can't be solely focused on the moment we are in, he teaches. We must maintain perspective to stay focused on where we want to be. It begins by recentering our highest values. As human beings, we are very quick to react and really slow to reason. In the words of NYU social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, quote, moral reasoning is mostly just a post hoc search for reasons to justify the judgments we have already made. Said more simply, we make emotional judgments very, very quickly to the things we hear without supporting evidence and without the input of our highest values. When someone comes to tell you that the Messiah has come, or, less metaphorically, when somebody comes to tell you exactly what you want to hear, peddling easy answers to life's most complex problems, or exactly what you don't want to hear, something that sounds antithetical to your entire being, we almost always succumb to the simplicity of a snap judgment entirely divorced from reason, divorced from our values. First, finish planting, Ben Zakkai suggests. Take a beat, take a breath, take all of the time you need to remember what's most important. That urge to immediately react within us is strong, but it's not really helpful. Articulate first what motivates you, what core values are at play in any given situation, and only then begin to search for solutions. You disagree with your daughter about the actions of the Israeli government? Try starting with, one of my core values is that I fear again losing generations of my family. What's driving you? Tired of arguing with your grandfather about a politician? Try, one of my core values is the ability for every person to make a better life for their children. What motivates you? By starting with our values, our core enduring values, we can find common ground while ensuring that our choices are reasoned and reasonable and not just emotional. Focusing on where we want to be means recentering our highest values in conversations and decision-making while also ensuring that we have the long game in mind. The symbolism of planting a tree in Yochanan ben Zakkai's example runs deeper than a mundane task like folding laundry. Not only did God see that trees of every fruit-bearing kind were good, Vayar Elohim ki tov, on the third day of creation, protecting the trees that will sustain life long after temporary conflict, becomes a religious precept for us. When in your war against a city you must lay siege to capture it, you must not destroy its trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you may not cut them down. Yochanan ben Zakkai was teaching us an important lesson about prioritizing the needs of future generations over our own. Though it's hard to see in the short term, this world is actually steadily getting better over the long term. The world has made spectacular progress in every single measure of human well-being, Steven Pinker writes in his book, Enlightenment Now, the case for reason, science, humanism, and progress. Murder rate, down. Quality of life, up. Global hunger, down. Life expectancy, up. Of course, progress isn't linear. Real historical curves have wiggles and upticks, spikes, and sometimes sickening lurches, he says. And I fear that we're living through one of those sickening lurches right now. But a long game perspective tells us that progress still occurs as these aberrations become less frequent, less severe, and sometimes cease altogether. Finally, after ensuring we center our values over our impulses and keep the long game in mind, we must keep faith in our ability to make a difference. Planting the tree in advance of verifying the arrival of the Messiah matters because it's our responsibility, our work to do. Others can chase after and greet the Messiah. Our work, he says, is in the small, incremental, seemingly insignificant until you can see how they have added up over time steps that bring the Messiah closer in the long term. As Steven Pinker says, the act of calling attention to progress isn't about self-congratulations or to suggest that the world in which we live isn't sickeningly bad at this very moment, because it is, but rather to remind us that prioritizing the needs of future generations works. When we are, and here I quote, or when we, I quote, see that a pile of laundry has gone down, it doesn't mean that the clothes have miraculously washed themselves. It means somebody washed the clothes. If a type of violence has gone down, then some change in the social, cultural, and material milieu caused it to go down. It makes it important to find out what the causes are so we can continue to intensify them and apply them more widely to ensure that it continues, end quote. And so it is with every measure of progress that we wish to see. Things didn't just get better. We made them better. And we must continue to actively pursue the advancement of progress by continuing to plant for future generations, even when we feel depressed and uncertain about our own future. If you're holding a sapling in your hand and someone tells you, "Come quickly, the Messiah is here," you now know what to do. First, finish planting, and then go and greet the Messiah. His words are a blueprint for navigating a world when it feels most impossible. We can't be solely focused on the moment we are in. We must maintain the perspective to stay focused on the future. We do so when we hold our highest values even in difficult moments, when we make our decisions with the long game in mind, and when we don't lose faith in the efficacy of our actions. Though it feels like we are living through a sickening lurch in the progress of humanity, perspective matters. Gamze ya'avor, this too will pass. Let's make sure that our actions, while we are waiting, prepare us to emerge even stronger as Americans and as American Jews. Shana Tova.